Hey, what's up there, fellow nerds? See Monty for Nerd Era on the solo tip again. Not coming at you with a review or any particular news right now. One of the things we like to talk about at Nerd Era is the idea of being a nerd. We mentioned in our mission statement video, you know, how you can be a nerd at anything. You know, if you have passion and knowledge, you're a nerd. You know, you can be a nerd at technology, you can be a nerd at music, sports, whatever. If you're heavily involved, if you're passionate and you have a lot of knowledge on the subject, you technically qualify as a nerd. But today I want to talk to you about my personal view on that as far as different levels of nerddom go. You know, because there are levels to this thing, man. So the way I see it is there's 4 different levels. There is fan, there is fanboy, there is geek, and then there is nerd. Now, as far as a fan, that's kind of like a passive interest. You know, you watch a couple of TV shows, you go to the movies when they come out. You really don't know that much about the thing you're watching. You know, you may not know that much about X-Men. You may not know that much about a particular sport. You just know you like the action. You know, you like seeing the action of it, or you know, you think the stuff that you do with your phone is cool, but you may not know all that much about, you know, like the processor or the camera or anything like that. So you don't really have that much knowledge, but you do have an interest. Not necessarily a passion, but an interest. So for me, that's a fan. Now, a fanboy is a little bit more in depth than that. Fanboy is someone who has a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more passion. You know, they're more actively involved. So you go see all the movies, or you read up on the latest info. You might not know all the little technical details, like for instance, again, going back to technology, you might not know all the little technical details, like you might not know what RAM is, you might not know what Mbps is and all that stuff, but you know the processor might be a little bit faster on your phone, you might know a few technical details, and you have more than a passing interest. You're actively involved. Like, you like to be up on the latest gear, you like to be up on the latest movie news. You know, you go to websites like Joe Blow and Comic Book News and, you know, Screen Rant and all those things, and you try to stay as involved as possible, but you're not as involved as, let's say, a geek. Now, a geek is someone who's, again, more involved, more knowledge. The level goes up and up and up as far as the knowledge and the interest goes. So a geek is someone who, like, let's say, goes and sees X-Men and might know, they go see Days of Future Past, and might know a little bit more about the storyline. They might have read the comic book, you know, and know about the storyline itself. Or if they're into technology, they'll know a little bit more about the different kinds of tech. Like, they'll know the difference between, say, 4K projection and just regular HD projection. They'll know the difference between a red Scarlet camera and a DSLR. They'll know a little bit more of the technical details, but they're not as heavily involved as, say, like a full-on nerd. Which brings us to the final level, nerd. Nerd is someone who is passionate, bordering on obsessive. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, just saying it is what it is. Passion bordering on obsessive, heavily detailed knowledge. So, if we're talking about comic books, they'll be able to tell you which specific issue and volume and panel a certain particular thing happened on. You know, they'll be able to say, hey, in volume 16, issue 148 of X-Men, this is what happened. Or on episode 22, season 6, you know, titled such and such, da da da. They'll know the specific details of the elements they're discussing. And they're very, very passionate. You know, they have this thing called what we refer to as nerd rage, where they'll get very, very passionate about the details. And if you don't stick to those specific things, they'll be outraged. Or like going to sports, if you know the particular stats of a player, if you know that this particular player on this particular football team has a certain number of rush passes for the season, if you know the specific stats, you know, then you're a sports nerd. So for me, that's the different levels. There's the fan who has a passing interest very little bit of knowledge. You have the fanboy, who's slightly more interested in the fan. He'll actively go out and see each particular movie. He'll actively go out and look for a particular technology. He'll root for a certain team. You know, have his favorite team in sports. Then you have the geek, who a little bit more detail oriented, knows a little bit more about the subject material than a fanboy or a fan, but not quite as knowledgeable as a nerd. Won't be able to pull out specific details from a specific comic book issue. And you have the full-on nerd, someone who's passionate, bordering on obsessive, someone who knows very specific details about the material. And these are the 4 levels, to me, of being a nerd. You know, all of those things kind of fall into the category of the nerd, but they're not a full-on nerd, if you understand what I'm saying. And I believe they each have their part in the community. You know, they each have their role to play. They're all involved. So I don't think that any one particular person should be excluded because, you know, they don't know as much about a subject as a nerd or a geek or a fanboy. You know, they're not, I wouldn't label them as posers, is what I'm saying. Is, you know, we have the issue of posers out there. I wouldn't call any of these guys posers. You know, might not be as passionate as you are about a particular subject, but they're still interested. And I think it's important to make them feel included in the community because we're pretty much where it's at right now. You know, being a nerd is the big thing. It's the hot commodity. Everybody's kind of like angling their markets towards nerddom. And I think it's important to make everyone feel included. And so we should respect all 4 levels. But we should acknowledge that there are different levels to this thing. That not everyone is going to be as passionate as or as knowledgeable about a particular subject as, say, a nerd or a geek, but they're still involved. So that's my theory on the 4 levels of nerddom. You can agree or disagree. Leave comments below. I hope you liked this video. Let's get the nerd era world going. Let's get the community built up. So thank you for your time. See Monty for Nerd Era, signing out. Have a great day.